Notice of the time, date, location, and agenda of this meeting, to the extent then known, was provided at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting in the following manner, pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 231 of the Law of 1975, by posting such notice on the bulletin board in the municipal building and by email notification generated by IQM2 to the offices of the Independent Press, Bloomfield Life, Star Ledger, Patch, Bristolnet, and Tappan to Bloomfield. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Louise, please call the roll.
Councilwoman Montel.
Here.
Councilman Joanna.
Here.
Councilwoman Cruz.
Here.
Councilwoman Davis.
Here.
Councilman Gamble.
Here.
Councilman Rockwell.
Here.
Mayor Beasley.
Here.
All present.
All right, first up, we have a presentation by Paula Pikus and Director DeMaio.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For about the past several months, Paula, Karen, and myself have been working collectively with our two departments to try to find a better and more comprehensive way in dealing with emotionally disturbed persons. We did an analysis over a calendar year and found that as a police department, we responded to 229 separate incidents of this nature. What was more disturbing to find was that how many of them were repeat persons. In other words, we were responding on the same person at the same location many times, and a couple of years ago we started to collaborate much more with the health department, would file our reports to them, but we looked at and said there still has to be a better way to do this. We did some research around the nation, found a couple of departments, one in Denver, one in Charlotte, that are doing something totally different. It actually teams up a police officer with a crisis intervention officer, and they actually work together. But the key part of it is not just responding to the call and dealing with it in a better way, but it's the follow-up. That police officer is assigned to the health department and works as a partner with the crisis intervention officer on a daily basis. It's a unit that works out of the health department, and the key to it is the case management and the continual follow-up, where if they're staying in touch with the people that they're dealing with and they're following up with case management and getting them the proper help that they need in a timely fashion, it'll in turn reduce the calls that the police need to respond to. We have two people in town that Paula will reference. We're one individual we responded to in the year 41 times on this one individual. Another person 29 times. And the health department has done an outstanding job in bringing them the help that they need, and they're in a better place right now. But working together like this is really a key element. It would require some funding, which if we decide we want to move forward, we would discuss with the assistant administrator on personnel issues. And it would be a unit that it's not just getting in a car and going out and doing their thing every day, but it's a very visible program. Something that we would do a tremendous amount of advertisement with in dealing with the Clare-Mess Hospital and other facilities that the health department currently deals with, and also even down to as far as just the vehicle that they use. It's a vehicle that's labeled and stickered and being very clear on what it is. Township of Bloomfield Crisis Intervention Team, and how we're taking a step forward proactively to get out in front of this, reduce our calls for service, and give the emotionally disturbed persons in our town the help that they really need. And with that, I just want to turn it over to Paula now, who's got some information that she would like to share.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Our role as social workers in this collaboration is to support the police, to free them up to address violent offenders and crime. I will be highlighting two cases where the police were called over 70 times to intervene. More often, when dealing with mental health issues, social work and case management could be utilized, reserving police intervention when public safety is a concern. The cases I will be discussing required a multidisciplinary approach, which could have had police resources reserved for situations where there was a clear threat to one's safety and well-being or criminal activity. Utilizing social work interventions with police support together enables us to put together a plan to solve the problem, so it does not always fall on the police. to respond or get bounced from one agency to another, never getting resolved. Case number 1 is a mentally ill, developmentally disabled resident living with his family who could not supervise him. He's wandering around the street all hours of the day and night. He's hospitalized 10 times and released, resulting in multiple calls to the police. The social workers working with the police, Adult Protective Services, Division on Developmental Disabilities, and Clara Moss Hospital and the court were able to evaluate and develop a care plan. The outcome is that the resident is now in a supervised living situation with appropriate monitoring and follow-up care, and their calls are no longer being made to 911, so the case was resolved. Case number 2 was a mentally ill, schizophrenic senior citizen who lived in the family home right near Town Hall until the home was sold and he ultimately became homeless. In fact, I'm sure we all know who he was. Over 41 police reports were filed. Due to chronic mental illness, placing this resident was difficult because he was resistant to accepting permanent housing. This resident did not pose a threat to himself or others, and we all know homelessness is not a crime. Continuous calls to the police could not resolve this problem. It was determined that establishing an ongoing relationship with the social workers was the best way forward. As a result, the social worker was able to coordinate with multiple systems, and when the opportunity presented itself, the police and a crisis unit were mobilized, and the resident was transferred to the hospital. Because the township social worker had the history and necessary documentation and a working relationship with Clara Moss Hospital, the person was not released back to the street. This was only accomplished through a coordinated effort with numerous agencies. The outcome, the elderly gentleman was transitioned into appropriate housing and is no longer on the street. In summation, statistics show that mental health, left untreated, is a drain on all our systems: the individual, the family, hospital, economy, and most importantly, our local police. The 2020 Bloomfield Department of Health and Human Services Public Health Outcome Survey results showed that the 3 top concerns in Bloomfield are mental health concerns, financial insecurity, and environmental issues. The human services social worker role in this new collaboration that we're proposing is to support the police in real time in cases where they are dealing with residents with mental health issues, homelessness, and domestic violence. The goal is to put a care plan in place, solve the problem, and to reduce recidivism, the revolving door, where the police are continuously called to the same house, only to have the resident hospitalized, stabilized, and released, but the core issue is not resolved, so it keeps happening. The collaboration will hopefully ensure that our police resources are used where they are most needed, keep our emergency rooms open for medically ill residents, not social issues, and help our most vulnerable residents get the help they need. Thank you.
Does anyone on the council have any questions, comments? Okay. Number 2, Township Forester.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Tom Purtell. The company I work for is Richview Consulting, and Rich Wallowitz and I are municipal foresters for the Township of Montclair. Myself with Bloomfield Township, myself up in Montclair. Rich does Glen Ridge, Madison Borough, Morristown, and I've done 4 township tree inventories. I'm finishing up Maplewood as we speak. I've been in the business for almost 30 years. I was behind the scenes as an arborist for the World Trade Center trees when they were growing up in Millstone Township before they were brought over to the World Trade Center. So that was one of the neatest projects I was ever involved with. But the purpose that I'm here today is I want to talk about some of the mechanics of what's going on with the tree care here in town. The number one issue in most of the towns that have aging canopies is public safety. That is first and foremost. A lot of residents tend to feel that because a tree is green, that the tree is okay, and there's a lot of checklists that I refer to and use for determining how safe that tree may be. So what we're going to really just quickly talk about is the tree removals and plantings that we did in 19 and 20 since we've been hired. I believe Samantha from DPW gave everybody a copy of my last week's inspection report, because that's indicative of the kind of things that I run into on a weekly basis. I want to briefly touch on the township parks, again, to try to discuss and focus on some public safety, and a couple other things that the increase of funding and ordinance review that we can discuss later. It's pretty interesting to see there's a trend here with tree removals in 19 and 20 that total almost 400 trees. And in that same period, we've only installed 75. So from a net tree loss, we're kind of moving in a stagnant position, and really want to try to implore that these management plans and urban forestry has a lot to do with trying to replace the canopy as much as physically possible. The weekly tree inspections that I look at, there's a very common theme that shows up all the time. Sidewalk complaints, roots in sewers, dead trees, conflicting branches, residents that want trees inspected, especially like after last week's storm. Those calls come out of the woodwork where everybody wants to have a big tree that they've been worried about to take a look at. And when I go out to take a look at the tree, it's only done by a visual ground inspection. I can't get up there with a bucket truck and poke around and look. There are some tools now being used in drone technology that makes that a little easier to accomplish. Another thing I do is drive-bys, because I see a lot of stuff. I'm sure as you folks all drive around town, you see something, you go, oh, I should make a note of that. So then the weekly inspection, basically, I have to give an initial risk assessment and recommendations. So a lot of times, if there's a tree that has to be taken down immediately, that has to be dealt with from a public standpoint, safety standpoint, and I will fight lock, stock, and barrel when a tree that is of safety concerns, it's got to go, okay? There's some other trees that have been on a list for quite a while that are a little lower priority because maybe they're half dead but not totally dead. So there's a lot of different issues that go on with that. Briefly, with the township parks, Director Scourman asked me to get involved with looking at all 12 of the park. I believe it's 12, I'm not sure the exact number. And what ended up happening was after I did my data collection and made some recommendations, after doing Brookside, Pulaski, and Vassar, I said to Director Scourman, I think we better put the brakes on this because there's a trend that's happening here that I want to make sure that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves. I want to make sure that we get some documentation and then at some point be able to incorporate down the road as financially can be afforded to deal with some of these things. One other quick issue, I'd like to try to get more actively involved in street improvement projects where if I know that there's a street that's going to be renovated at some point down the road, I'd like to get involved a little sooner, and that's something I'd like to work with engineering on. And the outsourcing support, I'm not going to really get into tonight. I don't think we have really enough time. I don't want to waste the board's or the council's time tonight. And one other issue I wanted to bring up is there's the New Jersey Licensed Tree Care Act, which is now law, where there are enforcement officers and there are physical penalties and fines for vendors that are not complying to this, and it's all in the interest of public safety. And that's something that, again, I'd like to, address at some point down the road with the appropriate people, and go from there. One other issue I'd like to also just mention with the sidewalk repair, as it's done now, is I would like to, similar to what I do up the hill in Montclair, is we get involved with looking at the roots prior to shaving them, because sometimes we can do that, sometimes we can't. So I'd like to maybe, at some point again, discuss some of these minor changes that I think would help us tremendously in getting some things taken care of. And that really kind of concludes my report here. I didn't want to spend too much time.
No, thank you, we appreciate it. I have a question, and it's,
Sure.
This actually just came up, it's happened in the past, but recently, PSE&G, I forget the name of the company, but they're putting in the larger telephone poles.
Yes.
And they absolutely, I don't even want to say butchered, they pretty much probably killed.
That's a good word.
All the trees along Broad Street, kind of going from Sunset near the Glenridge Country Club. And it looks horrendous. How can we ensure that those trees, one, aren't killed, or two, that because now they're leaning towards the apartment building that is right there
Yes.
during a bad storm?
That's a good question. The power company actually has spent a lot of time in marketing and trying to educate people in my position to look at when trees get replaced under power lines, just to use little trees, not the big crazy oaks, okay? So that's part of the problem, and that was something that happened 60, 70 years ago when those trees were planted. When it gets to the point where structurally a tree is out of balance, the big problem, depending on the species, is the load that may be at the end of that branch. And depending on the tree, depends on how good the wood is to be able to withstand it. So sometimes you can let those stick around for a little longer than maybe other species, but at the same point, I think you're looking at, again, a long-term replacement strategy. And that's one of the things that an inventory can really help earmark, is we can actually pinpoint where some of these neighborhoods are where this happened. Because like you mentioned, there was another improvement with the power lines on Passaic Street. And the PSE&G's contractors came in and took down 15 or 20 huge London planes, very similar to a lot of London planes in some of these neighborhoods. And all the stumps are there. And they're just sitting there now. And I'm gonna have to try to chase them down and see if we can deal with something like that. But then that's another spot where they just took them down.
And they're required to plant new trees, correct, when they take down our tree?
That, I'd have to check on that.
Okay.
I don't think that that's a new
Because typically,
one.
and Paul Lasek, when they tear up our road, they're required to repave the road, so that might be something we could look into for some of those trees.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's where I'd like to get more involved with some of the street improvement projects, because once the destruction of the curbing and the sidewalks are opened up, a lot of times as soon as anything else around that tree is disturbed, that tree is even more compromised. So I'd rather err on the side of public safety, especially with the bigger, older trees. No doubt about it. It's where it comes to, because everybody had seen pictures of a tree laying on a house that blown over after a storm. And that's what I want to try to prevent. So that's the purpose. Any other questions?
Does anybody, Councilwoman Davis?
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
So I have a couple questions. One is sort of to educate myself a little bit, but I know that there are, when we deal with like forestry, that there's a sort of balance, and certain trees are good to plant, some trees are not good to plant, and that kind of thing. And it occurred to me that when we have things like Arbor Day celebrations, and we, get our, people get trees, or people in residents may decide to just plant a tree because they want to. I'm wondering if we could get some sort of guidance, if it doesn't already exist, in terms of what would be appropriate trees to plant in Bloomfield. Because I think that I asked the question because I was picking up a tree, and I was like, are these approved for Bloomfield? Because I know that there's some, is it the right kind of tree? Is it a male, female? Like all these kinds of things that I don't really know about, but I just know enough to use the words. I mean, to be dangerous. But my concern is that, that is there any guidance that we can provide and put on the website that will literally give, people recommendations about planting trees? Because I know it's one thing when we talk about the trees that we planted that are along the road, but people are plant them in the backyard, and they're these, sequoias in the people's backyard, and
Yeah, no.
only you laugh, because no one else is like, know what I'm
It's
talking about.
Metasequoia
They were like-
glycostriates.
They were like, it's
technically.
not a sequoia, she's a,
Yeah, there are a lot of different documents and guides that have already been established, like through the New Jersey Shade Tree Federation, the New Jersey Tree Foundation. There's lots of information that have links that we could easily put on a website. And
So
it would-
may I ask that you share that information with the town administrator so we can find a place for that on a website so that people can know?
Oh, absolutely. That was a talking point that I really didn't want to bring up tonight, but since you did, that's something else that, as part of trying to get as much information to residents as possible. So it's odd. We tend to keep repeating the same mistakes year after year after year. And by having this kind of information and newer ways of looking at planting trees now, using the right tree in the right spot, that's basically what it comes down to.
Exactly. And so thank you. So I think that would be helpful, because I think a lot of things, we're dealing with things now that you said were planted 60 or 70 years ago. Well, that's one thing, but it's like now there is knowledge that we know now that may not be available to everybody. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is another curiosity point, and this is probably more appropriate for the town administrator. You mentioned in your presentation something along the lines of like, when it's a tree that needs to come down right now, you really press for it, and the other things are lower down the list. How do we determine, do we budget for tree removals in a year, and then we hit a certain point, or how does that work in terms of when something becomes a priority? When it actually gets done. So I know that Tom is prioritizing, but how do we?
So some of it is budgeted for, when emergency circumstances come up all the time, and the staff have the trees not safe, and we have to do all that.
Do we hit a limit at the end of a year and then to say that that's going to come in the next budget, or?
I think it depends on the number of emergencies. We have a storm rate, we exceed what we had budgeted for. So I don't really know the answer to the question as far as whether we extend it to the following year, or if it's something that's incorporated.
I was just a little bit curious about the idea that we had trees that needed to come down, and that residents, because this is the kind of thing that we have to address, is the residents saying, the forester said that this should come down, and they want to know when it's going to come down. And so having a sense of being able to say, we budget annually, if it's not critical, I just want to be able to answer that kind of question.
Yep.
And we also discussed having a schedule sent out at the end of the report, so you'll know ahead of time what trees are scheduled to come down. And then, of course, when there's an emergency tree that comes down, we'll pass that information as well.
Thank you, Tim.
There's one other website I want to let you, it's called treesaregood.org, and that's the International Society of Arboriculture's website, and that's kind of the tree Bible website for tree care throughout the planet, all right? The ISA certification is one of my credentials that I have, and they always have great information to go to, so I would definitely, it's called treesaregood.org.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
There's a piece called the 10 things that make trees hazardous, and it's a beautiful picture. And once you see that, you're going to, oh yeah, I saw a tree that has 5 of those. And those are the kinds of things I have to look at when I'm making a
I'll
decision to
check
take
it
a
out.
tree down.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions, comments?
Just
Yes,
one.
Councilman Gamble.
Yes, sir.
Tom, thank you for coming in. I know we got to speak the other day. And thank you for bringing up some of these points. I think one of the good things I wanted to touch on was your recommendation to work with the engineering department. So like, I know we have some repaving projects and things like that coming up. Oftentimes, trees that are in poor condition, they come up in these projects, but I think, especially based on the numbers that you showed us where our tree population is going down, if we could get in front of that and try and come up with a plan while we're paving, almost think of it like an infrastructure, like we're doing the sidewalks, we're doing the curbing, the street. These trees, they provide shade and, better air quality for our residents. So I think if we try and budget projects and put the trees in with the actual streets, it would be beneficial to the township.
Yeah, I agree. The average life of a street tree is, I believe, somewhere between 15 and 17 years old. It's not that high. It's a tough place to try to get a tree to grow. There's no soil. That's the bottom line. So we have to be careful how we do things. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Take care. Public hearing for Green Acres Grant Program?
Council, what this is, and it says as much in the header for this on today's agenda. This will be an item for action later on, but I just want to read this in the record because DEP does require a public hearing. Hearing for Green Acres Grant Program. The purpose of the hearing is to obtain public comment on grant applications to be submitted by the Township of Bloomfield to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's Urban Parks Grant Program, and an application to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's Green Acres Program. The former application is for improvements to the Clark's Pond South softball field, and the latter is for improvements to the Clark's Pond South softball field as well. I don't think that's faster to field, Little League of New Jersey. Notice of this hearing was published, and all who wish to make comment, given an opportunity to speak.
Okay. Does anybody wish to make a comment? Okay. All right. Public comment, we have Susanna Sotillo.
I'm vaccinated. Susanna Sotillo, 24 Parkway West. I'm here to express my concerns about the proposed location of a cannabis dispensary in or near the 3rd Ward, which is beset with many problems. I would like to start by quoting Andrew Friedman, former director of marijuana coordination in Colorado. "You do not legalize for taxation. It's a myth. You're not going to pave streets. You're not going to be able to pay teachers. The big red herring is the whole thing that the tax revenue will solve a bunch of crises, but it won't. I am primarily concerned about the impact the sight of dispensaries will have on adolescents, even though no underage person can enter a dispensary. All the experimental and review articles from numerous medical, pharmacological, and mental health journals, psychiatry primarily, I have read, stress the fact that this is a vulnerable population that is strongly influenced by peers. As reported by CERTA et al. 2020, a 25% increase in cannabis use disorder among adolescents was found in the 12 to 17 age range. Furthermore, if dispensaries have edibles such as brownies, cookies, and candy that look appetizing, children in various states where marijuana cannabis has been legalized have ingested these dangerous products when adults bring them home and leave them unattended. Children end up in emergency rooms showing lethargy and ataxia. That's a study by Richard, Smith, and Mullen in 2017. Another concern I have with the easy availability of cannabis dispensaries is the increase in traffic fatalities and crashes that have been reported in Washington, Colorado, and 9 controlled states by medical researchers, Adelot et al. 2019. Currently, I am not aware of any effective way that can help law enforcement assess the level of impairment of those driving under the influence of cannabis. As the council persons are aware, cars speed along Berkeley Avenue on Parkway West, where many take shortcuts on their way to Assessing and Bloomfield Avenue. And there is always a traffic jam in that area. High-potency THC and marijuana smoking from early adolescence through adulthood affects the brain, and experimental studies have shown that there are cognitive consequences of this addiction to marijuana, which is compounded by alcohol use. And this is particularly important because the jobs of the future require one to have a knowledge of science. There are numerous studies using MRIs and PET scans supporting these findings. On a personal level, one of my nephews died 3 years ago. He was bipolar and was consuming alcohol and smoking marijuana and had serious problems with anger management. When I tried to convince him to enter a clinic or rehabilitation center, for which I would have paid, he became enraged and threatened me. He also threatened and insulted one of my siblings who lives in Florida, his godfather, because he wanted us to give him $6,000 in order to move to California. Unfortunately, he died a year later, away from the only family who cared for him. I just wish I had reached out to someone with expertise in these matters. I would urge the mayor and town council to find a more appropriate location for cannabis dispensaries, since adults have the right to smoke marijuana and ingest THC-infused edibles in New Jersey. The center of town would be a more appropriate venue because there is a parking garage and any violations of the law could be easily monitored. There are also many vacant stores there, and also vacant stores are available around the north of Broad Street toward Bellevue Avenue. As is currently the case, teenagers find a way to obtain marijuana either through friends, relatives, or illegal dealers. I have personally observed teenagers, as well as adults, smoking marijuana while walking in the park or sitting on benches at night. One of my neighbors usually calls me about this because she has small children and doesn't want them exposed to cannabis. This is an ongoing problem. I thank you for your attention and have left some handouts with Ms. Luis Palagan.
Thank you, Susanna. Grover Furr?
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. My name is Grover Furr. I live at 24 Parkway West. I have nothing to add to the scientific and objective information that Susanna Satia has just given you and that she will also distribute to you in her handout. I'd like to reiterate that marijuana consumption really there's no useful social benefit gained by marijuana consumption. It has been legalized, it's been decriminalized, and that of course is good. But there are problems with the legalization of it, and there's no test at this point where the police or any other agency can test to see if a driver is under the influence of marijuana, as there is, for example, alcohol consumption. And I think that it's perhaps not widely recognized how dangerous marijuana is as a drug of entry into the consumption of other dangerous substances. I have experience with my own son, Derek, who is presently in alcohol rehabilitation, but he got started on alcohol through smoking marijuana while he was in high school, and then continued to smoke marijuana and then got addicted to alcohol. This has consumed a number of years of his young life. That's a personal experience, but of course there are many other cases like this one. I'd just like you to consider that there is there's language that you can hear that says this is a social justice issue. Decriminalization is certainly a social justice issue, but legally selling marijuana and distributing it is not a social justice issue. It's basically just a business issue. There are businesses who want to make profit by doing this. I too live in the Third Ward. I think it's an inappropriate place to have any kind of legal marijuana distribution, cannabis distribution. I would like to see Bloomfield avoid any distribution centers except for medical purposes, which of course is legal and makes medical sense. But if that's not possible, I think that the center of town is the most appropriate place for cannabis distribution, and I think that we need to need to find or construct guidelines that make it difficult or impossible for cannabis to be distributed in forms that are enticing to children and adolescents. This is a problem that doesn't exist with alcohol, of course, but it does exist with cannabis because it's made into candies and cookies and all kinds of other things that are tempting to young people. So please do not establish or permit the establishment of marijuana or cannabis distribution centers in the 3rd Ward of our town. Thank you.
So just to let everyone know that there will be a medical marijuana going up on Bloomfield Ave, which will convert to recreational. The will of the people in the township overwhelmingly supported this, and a nationwide company is coming in. We, as a council, support this, and we're going to, tonight on the agenda, we're going to talk about the ordinance of how many locations and so on. So, but you know, I for one, I've never been hit it. I've always supported the legalization of marijuana, and it's very important for our society, and it's I think it's a great thing that our state did. So, Township Administrator.
First up, we have Planning Director Ron Quinn to discuss the contract with Wartyna for the environment.
Can I get somebody to move this?
Move, Mayor.
Second, Councilman Joanno. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 2?
Number 2, we have the Ontario conflict with Essex County, Washington. And use again going forward, not to exceed $3,500.
Motion.
Moved by Councilwoman Cruz. Can I get a
Second.
Second, Councilwoman Mundell. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 3?
Number 3 is a non-federal contract with Jersey Sound. Its services used at the summer fun and fall concert series. Contracts not to exceed $65,000.
Okay. Can I get somebody?
I'll move it.
Moved by Councilman Gamble.
Second.
Second, Councilman Rockwell. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. So, number 4 is 29 Hill Street and 67 Franklin, removal of handicap. And handicap parking request for 12 Kilmer, 112 Mayolis, and 89 Broughton. And obviously, number 6 is our Click It or Ticket campaign that we get a grant for every year. Can I get somebody to move these?
Motion.
Moved by Councilwoman Cruz. Second. Second, Councilman Gamble. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Director, number 7.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to review my monthly report from the Police Department. Complaints against personnel, we're at a current total for the year of 23 right now, as compared to 28 at the same time last year. It's an 18% reduction in complaints again. For the month of May, there were 4 external complaints made by citizens as follows. One was a complainant indicated that the officer read the VIN number of the vehicle over the radio, which is procedure, and the officer should have done that, but the motorist felt that wasn't appropriate. The complaint was exonerated. Number 2, complainant stated that they were issued a parking violation that they thought was unfair. They were directed to the courts that it could be fought, and Internal Affairs investigated the fact that it wasn't the only summons issued, there were others, and they were all issued consistent with town ordinance. Number 3, complainant stated that while on a medical call, the officer shouted and was rude. We reviewed the body camera footage and found that the officer did in fact shout, but he was shouting at the dispatcher to clear the air because he wanted a rush on the ambulance to come to assist the person that they were dealing with. And number 4, complainant stated that during a motor vehicle stop, the officer didn't practice social distancing when retrieving the driver's license and registration and insurance for the car, which it's impossible to do. The officer did in fact have his mask on. He was polite and courteous during the stop. and that complaint is still being reviewed by Internal Affairs. We had 2 early warnings for the month of May. One was an external complaint that was triggered, the early warning due to 2 uses of force in the last 12 months by that officer. That early warning trigger will be reviewed by myself and the command staff in the first week of this upcoming month. An officer had an external complaint, a use of force, and a motor vehicle accident, all within a 6-month period. This again triggers an early warning. All 3 incidents will be reviewed in depth by myself and the command staff and the review board. No officers were placed into early monitoring or intense supervision for the period. We had 1 use of force in the month of May by our officers. Detectives were making an arrest for a repeat offender package theft suspect. The suspect fled on foot when a foot chase ensued. When the officers and detectives did catch up with the suspect, he began to spit at the officers. They used compliance holds, subdued the suspect, and put him in custody. No injuries to the officer or the suspect. And also, when the suspect got into headquarters, he continued to be unruly and defecated on the floor of the booking room. The suspect was charged accordingly. There was no incidents reviewed by the use of force for this month because last month there were 0. Motor vehicle stops for the month of May, we had a total of 586. Of those, 146 or 24.9% were Caucasian, 197 or 33.6 were African American, and 212, 36.1 were Hispanic, 30 Asian at 5%. We had a total of 51 arrests for the month of May. 46 of those were generated by calls for service. 5 of those were generated by police actions. The ones that were generated from calls for service, 1 was a robbery, 2 aggravated assaults, 5 burglaries, 15 thefts and shopliftings, 5 simple assaults, a receiving stolen property, 2 frauds, a criminal mischief, 1 possession of a weapon, 4 DUIs, 4 services of warrants, and 5 for other minimal offenses. Of the 5 that the police initiated the arrests, 2 were DWIs, 1 was a service of warrant, 1 simple assault, and 1 fraud. Overall crime in town for the year is at 210 Part 1 offenses right now. That's down from 221 at the same time last year, and we continue a downward trend at 5%. New initiatives that we're working on right now. During the week of May 24th, we conducted bicycle patrol for 3 more of our Bloomfield police officers. That brings us up to 17 officers that are now trained in bicycle patrols for the summer. In that class, we also trained 3 Glen Ridge police officers and 3 Montclair police officers. On May 21, I had a meeting with Jennifer Payne Parrish from the NAACP regarding the pending civil service examination for police officer. What we're working on, although a date has not been formally announced by civil service yet, is coming up with a group, and I've talked to a few of them that are very receptive to it, where when someone takes the civil service exam, people that have means to do so go to a study group, which can cost several $1,000s to prepare them for the examination. We're going to host something here in Bloomfield for Bloomfield residents in conjunction with the NAACP, where we offer it for free to town residents that have applied and are taking the civil service exam for a police officer. They're very excited about it. We are. It'll certainly increase the diversity that we want in the police department. Training updates, we have decided on the scope of work that was submitted to us by Rutgers. I've already had a conversation with the township administrator on a funding source for this. We are going to identify that within the police budget and bring that to you for approval at the July conference meeting. We've locked in the week of August 9th to send Captain Anthony Sisko and 2 additional department members to a train-the-trainer course to become certified de-escalation and crisis intervention trainers. What that will enable us to do is not just train our officers in this sporadically, but make it a part of our biannual curriculum that we give our officers twice a year. We're seeing some incidents now where the crisis intervention training that our officers have received already is paying dividends. The way they're handling certain situations, feedback positively that we're getting from community members, it's really moving in the right direction, and we're happy to see it. In addition, over the past month, the Essex County prosecutors offered a training program called Engaging and Building Partnerships with the Muslim American Community. We've also sent several of our officers to that, and they're bringing back materials for us so that we can distribute to the rest of the police department as well. Our EDP calls for the month were a total of 21, which is a 31% increase from 16 in the prior month. And these are the incidents that we were talking about, that Paula spoke of and I spoke about earlier. And hopefully, if we move forward with the program that we're looking to do, we're looking forward to seeing these numbers and these calls actually decrease by handling them the right way. And that concludes my report. Do you have any questions?
Does anybody have any questions for Director DeMaio? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Township Engineer?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The first item I have is a change order number 1 for our lead service exploration program. That's been going on. That phase was basically to find, uncover, and document lead service lines. Since we were in the process of paving Glenwood Avenue, I requested that the contractor do that street so we find out if there's any lead service line. We found 10, and our Public Works Department removed them, so it made, this way we don't have to go back there or tear up a newly found road. The cost was an extra $37,261 for 110 additional explorations.
Okay. Could I get somebody to move this? Motion. Moved by Councilwoman Cruz.
Second.
Second, Councilman Gamble. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 2.
All right, the next item I have is our local aid grants for 2022 are due by July 1st. I made a recommendation that we try to leverage money for JFK Drive in the vicinity of Bloomfield Avenue and south of there. As we know, we have issues with traffic. Upon looking at some of the reports and what was done, I think the best way to solve this problem is to a more comprehensive approach. Overhead signs possibly, some potentially additional traffic signals. So I think it's a good candidate to work on this and get it improved. The other thing is it's multi-jurisdictional. We have the county and we have the Turnpike Authority. So I think with all of that, there's going to be some additional design and back and forth on that. So hopefully the state's going to get generous soon with grants, and we can leverage this. It's broken into 2 phases, even though I'm applying for 1. So depending upon how much funding we get, we can do it on a phase process. Phase 1 being the Bloomfield Avenue JFK portion.
Okay. Can I get somebody to move this?
Motion.
Moved by Councilwoman Davis. Can I get a second? Or was that Councilwoman Mundell? I'm sorry. Councilwoman, moved by Councilwoman Mundell.
I was projecting my voice over that way.
Because you were like leaning in. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second, Councilwoman Davis. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Number 3.
Yeah, this is actually just kind of an introduction and discussion. The city of Newark recently adopted an ordinance related to lead service lines, particularly how a town deals with them. First and foremost, you formally make them or illegal technically in the township, and then you can proceed through various processes as to how to deal with it. One of the things I found very interesting, which I think is certainly something we can look at, is when properties change title, that we put some onus on the seller to verify and certify whether he has a lead service connection or not. If he does, they need to remove it before a C of O is issued. And this way we kind of stop the trend of it just getting passed on to owner and owner. So I think that's one aspect that's worth looking at, as well as others regarding how we handle when a lead service line is connected and who's responsible for it.
Okay. Can you distribute the ordinance around and?
Well, the Newark one is in your, I'll redistribute
Okay.
it. You do have it. Actually, it's pretty short.
Okay. Well, take a look at it, and if you could work with the town attorney and see what you recommend, and try to get it on for the next conference meeting.
Very good.
Number 4?
Yes, our membership to the Morris County Cooperative, it's a 5-year membership. It's due to end this fall, so we just need to have a resolution and sign an agreement. We use it all the time for various construction and purchases.
Okay. Moved by Councilman Joanno. Second, Councilwoman Cruz. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 5?
All right, the next item is an emergency water valve installation that we had to do on Bloomfield Avenue by the Verizon building. To make a long story short, they were getting incredible amounts of water in the building. Turned out to be their service line. It became an emergency because apparently they have a lot of servers and communication equipment down there that if it flooded at the rate it was going, there could have been a serious communication fault or bigger disaster. So we hired Carner Brothers to make the repair, which they did for a total cost of $26,250. I'm working with Verizon to see if they'll they'll compensate us for that, because essentially, even though it was our main, the issue was they couldn't shut their service line off. There was no valve, so we had to act fast to get the situation solved.
Can I get somebody to move this?
Motion?
Moved by Councilwoman
Second.
Cruz, second Councilman Gamble. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. And number 6.
Yeah, we had a traffic study done for the area on Broad Street by the Glen Ridge Country Club. Apparently, there's a lot of golf cart and pedestrian traffic there, and it was determined that there was a need for a rapid flashing beacon there. Whenever you do one of these things on a county road, if you take the initiative to do it, the county requires you to have a hold harmless agreement, meaning that you'll maintain the signal and deal with any issues that may come up with it. It's kind of standard procedure for them. Again, with this one is the Glen Ridge Country Club is offering to compensate us for the full installation of that. So I think we should just go ahead with it.
Okay. Moved by Councilman Joanno, second Councilman Gamble. Any questions, comments?
Just a quick question. So if there's something mechanical that needs to be supported, will that also be supported by the Glen Ridge Country Club, or are we responsible for maintenance after?
We would be responsible for the maintenance, but fortunately, we've had a couple of these around now. Very rarely does something go wrong because they're solar powered. But yeah, it would be our responsibility. But as I said, from what I've seen with the ones we have, they've never really been a maintenance problem. They're relatively simple to repair.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. All right, I actually skipped a couple. My colleagues didn't even let me know. Going back to Township Attorney.
We figured there had to be some rationale.
No, I looked at the wrong page.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Number 1 is discussion of a stormwater ordinance amendment, which we did discuss earlier this year. New Jersey DEP required all New Jersey municipalities to review and make certain amendments to their stormwater control ordinances, which we did, and subsequently, upon further review with our planning director and
Thank you. Got it. With our planning director and our zoning board attorney, discovered that some further revisions need to be done. So these revisions are amendments establishing minimum stormwater management requirements and controls for major developments. So it's really a flood control and pollutant reduction
Okay.
management.
Somebody to move this? Moved by Councilman Joanno. Second Councilwoman Cruz. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 2.
Number 2, our tax council, Inglesino, Webster, Wascala, and Taylor are close to their not-to-exceed amount for the year. So for the last number of years, we've put a reasonable but modest cap on most of our attorneys. This year, we had an increase in filings at both the tax court and county tax board, in large part as a result of the townwide revaluation. And on top of the additional filings, the Essex County Tax Board, who generally schedules hearings throughout the year, front-loaded them all in April and May, requiring them to spend more time than they normally would because the Tax Board is moving locations from East Orange to Newark. So what I'd like to do is add $30,000 to their annual not-to-exceed amount. I did speak with the attorney, the managing attorney there, and they can certainly keep it to that for the end of the year. So it would be a total not-to-exceed amount of $80,000. That would be their cap.
Can I get somebody to move this?
I'll move it.
Moved by Councilwoman Cruz. Second. Councilman Gamble. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
And number 3.
Okay, number 3, what I wanted to start talking about and have some discussion about the ordinance regulating cannabis business operations. I circulated a short memo I did to try to highlight some of what I think are important issues for us to discuss. But I did just want to put some information on the record, not just for you, Mayor and Council, but also for the members of the public. And the Mayor did touch on this. Just to review what this law is, in 2020, New Jersey voters and approximately 71% of Bloomfield voters approved an amendment to the state constitution to allow for the legalization of a controlled form of marijuana called cannabis. And later, Governor Murphy signed into law the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Enforcement Assistance and Marketplace Modernization Act in February of this year. That legalizes the recreational use of marijuana by adults 21 and over, and also establishes a regulatory and licensing scheme for commercial recreational operations, use, and possession. So I'm bringing it to you, or not me, but we're bringing it to you now because there are some deadlines coming up. Municipalities that wish to prohibit or regulate one or more classes of cannabis establishments must act by ordinance by or before August 21st, 2021. That's a date that is 180 days from the day the law was signed. That's how much time they gave. So by prohibiting or regulate, it would be controlling the number of establishments, distributors or delivery services that you have in town, the location, manner, and times of operation, whether or not to enact a local cannabis tax, and establishing civil penalties. What's important to note is that if this or any municipality does not act, any class of cannabis establishments or distributor will be permitted to operate in the municipality, and once we elect not to do anything, we're locked in for 5 years. Conversely, if municipalities initially opt out, they can opt in at any time during that 5-year period. But if you don't, the underlined point is if you don't regulate or try to control the way you want to now, you're out of luck for 5 years. The timeline we're looking at is to hopefully introduce an ordinance at the next regular meeting and get, between now and then, get your insights and recommendations, and then have a second reading and public hearing at the July 19th combined meeting, since we only have one meeting in the month. I did send around, because there's a lot of things to digest in this, what I think is important is that you recognize there's not just, a lot of people talk about the retailers, but there are 6 cannabis licenses that are available. Cultivator, manufacturer, wholesale license, distributor, and a delivery license. So these are all things you can take into consideration. You can regulate all of them. None of them permit some, prohibit others. It's up to you. But what I think you should know is if no action is taken, the businesses would be permitted, the retail would be permitted as a conditional use in all commercial zones or retail zones, and the other non-retail businesses would be permitted uses in all industrial zones. So it's not just a matter of letting it go. I think if you want to determine where or where not they should be in town, that's important for us to do now. Also, I think it was brought up by one of the speakers about a tax. There is a local cannabis tax that is permissive through the state law. And municipalities can enact the local tax that cannot exceed 2% for cultivators, manufacturers, and retailers, and 1% for wholesalers. And the tax is based on the receipts for each sale and is paid directly to the municipality. It's almost treated like delinquent property taxes, since it gets paid directly to the town. If it's not paid, the township can establish penalties for that. So again, I think the simplest way for me to describe it is think about where or where not you would like to, maybe how many you want to limit it to, whether it's retail or beyond retail. I gave an example in my memo for Hoboken, obviously more congested, smaller area-wise, but probably similar in population, is proposing a maximum of 5 cannabis retail facilities citywide, regardless of whether they sell medical or recreational cannabis. And they're prohibiting any non-retail licenses. I'm sure they don't have any space for anything other than
Well, we're retail. in the same boat a little bit with
Yeah,
this.
and we're in a similar boat. Even our master plan has talked about reducing what industrial space we do have.
Yeah.
Certainly, we don't have fields for cultivation, but a lot of these cultivators are indoor anyway. You can also, what we should also know is cannabis businesses cannot be co-located in grocery stores, delis, indoor food markets, and other stores engaging in retail food and premises licensed for the retail sales of food, of alcoholic beverages, I'm sorry. So it's not like you can have a combined liquor store and
Right.
cannabis store. So these will be standalone, something else to think about. I know I've worked on this. We've had a number of discussions with the administrator, with planning director, with our zoning officer, with our land use board, trying to get everybody who has different looks, and the police, of course.
I think for our township, either 4 or 5 sounds appropriate, to minimize it, but also do something where you don't allow more than 2 per ward. So if you have 2 in a ward, you can't open a 3rd one. So we don't have all 4 or 5 in the same ward.
Yeah, and we can put a buffer in the sense of maybe they can't be, like some towns have, you can't have 2 liquor licenses within 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
Some places, maybe it's not 2 retailers within X
Yeah.
number of feet, and that de facto keeps it.
Right.
You can't load up one ward over.
I would definitely do something like that. And then I don't think we really have to get into, as a township, the cultivation part of it. I mean, because I don't think they're going to come, but we should probably ban it anyway, just to make sure.
I think a safe thing, and that's why I mentioned that if you opt out now, you can opt in as you can take baby steps, in other words. I think retailer is probably what's most attractive, what would make Bloomfield most attractive to businesses. I don't know that cultivators are looking for tight spots. I don't know, but maybe we can, walk before we run with this.
Okay. Anybody else?
Something
Councilwoman
very
Cruz?
new. Obviously, it's new to 500 plus municipalities. Everybody's on the same timeline, so there's a lot of talk and discussion and people trying to figure this out, how to get this working for their particular towns.
Yeah. Councilwoman Cruz?
Yeah, I have a question. You had said there were 6 areas. Can you just read them off?
Sure.
Please.
And I can describe them, Councilwoman. You have Class 1 is called a cannabis cultivator license for facilities involved in growing and cultivating cannabis. So I think of that as the farmer. Class 2 is a manufacturer license for facilities involved in the manufacturing, preparation, and packaging of cannabis items. So if they make cigarettes or they make other products that have cannabis in it. Wholesaler license is Class 3 for facilities involved in obtaining and selling cannabis items for later resale by other licensees. So I guess like any other wholesaler, how they distribute to the retails, but not direct to consumers. Class 4 distributor license involved in transporting cannabis plants in bulk from one licensed cultivator to another licensed cultivator. Again, not dealing with the retail population. Or cannabis items in bulk from any type of licensed cannabis business to another. Cannabis retailer license is Class 5 for locations at which cannabis items and related supplies are sold to consumers. So that's the one direct-to-consumer storefront, so to speak. Class 6 is called a cannabis delivery license. So that's somebody providing courier services. The one wrinkle with this is, should Bloomfield choose not to issue Class 6 delivery licenses? So what those people do, I try to think of it almost as a DoorDash, a Grubhub for cannabis. And whether or not we choose to license that particular business, we can't prevent a courier from operating in town. So let's say Montclair has a courier who picks up from a lawful retail place or a lawful place and is allowed to deliver inside Bloomfield, whether or not we independently license those people. So you can't, that commerce can't, cross-border commerce can't be stopped according to the law. So those are your 6.
Okay.
Cultivator, manufacturer, wholesaler, distributor, retailer, and delivery license.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Councilwoman Mundell, did you have anything?
I did have a question actually about the cultivation one. only because, and I'm not super familiar with it, but I don't know what our zoning ordinances say about urban farming. I know that you can cultivate marijuana through like hydroponics, so that might be an option for a business looking to come to Bloomfield. And I wouldn't necessarily want to restrict them from being able to do that, but maybe we ought to look at the zoning ordinances as they pertain to like urban farming. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
That way it doesn't restrict us in the future, even if we don't opt for that right now.
Yeah, that's fine. The one thing, the reason I kind of said it was, most of these cultivation sites are looking for 100,000 or more square feet. Old factories, that type of thing. That's kind of why I mentioned it, as a lot of cultivation's not going to look to come to Bloomfield because we don't have the space or the site. So, Councilman Davis,
Yes.
you lost your train of thought.
Yeah, I was thinking about Jenny's comment. So when we start working, so you said this has to be done by August 14th. So when working backwards, when would we need to be able to do first ordinance?
So the way I would like to do it is introduce, I have a draft ordinance that we've been playing with for, I don't know, weeks, maybe a month, which I will circulate. What I thought to do is make some tweaks based on our discussion, circulate it. We could introduce at the next meeting, our end of June regular meeting. Then we would have approximately a month if amendments needed to be made before second reading in July. I don't know the date of our August meeting, if that'll allow us to get it done in time. Is it before or after the 21st? It's after. Okay. That's why we picked those dates.
So may I recommend that, I was about to recommend that because there seems to be a lot of moving parts, and I think it's a lot easier, so like with anything, with a lot of things, sometimes it's easier to edit than it is to like.
That we've been playing with for, that's me, weeks, maybe a month, which I'll circulate. Turn down your radios at home, right?
I was like, we've been throwing voices all night, so, you know. But yeah, so what I was going to recommend is that we, that like maybe a subset of the council work together on putting together, you know, sort of something that we can all kind of respond to.
Sure.
Because I think this is literally a case where the devil's going to be in the details, right? We were all going to want to see it on the actual ordinance form. And so I don't know if that makes sense. I think, you know, I'm not trying to volunteer you, Sarah.
No, I'm definitely
We just need
interested.
to preferably
But
move.
since the first, you know, people are discussing the third ward, and that I think weighing in on that would be a really important position.
We
You
just
have a
need to
different
move quick
perspective.
to have it for first
Well,
reading
what
on
I
the
could do is,
28th.
before the end of this week, hopefully maybe by Wednesday, get something circulated to the whole council, and I'll just yellow highlight certain things, you know, maybe where buffers are involved, you know, distances, how to limit numbers. You know, you can reread all the definitions, but like you said, those aren't the devilish details. It's the other things. It's the locations. It's the numbers.
And what I would definitely like to see is that you know, the reason why government and municipal, there's lots of reasons that, you know, there's like legalization and, you know, decriminalization that was discussed earlier. But I think that from a township perspective, the idea of the tax revenue that can be drawn from it is something that I would want to see, that we got the 2%.
Full 2%.
Yeah, absolutely. And if-
That's not even a question.
And that has to be in the ordinance, and that's,
right.
yeah, I think that's very important.
So you'll get it to us by the end of the week?
Yes,
So we said, okay.
before the end of the week, for sure.
Perfect. Sounds good. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We're good? Perfect. All right. Now let me make sure I didn't lose my place again. Finance Director.
okay if you want to skip the finance section. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Item number 1 is just for discussion only. It's to extend our temporary budget to cover us into July. Our current temporary budget is through June 30th. Item number, should I move on?
You go on number 2, yep. Does anybody have any questions about number 1? Okay, number 2.
Item number 2 will actually be on for action tonight. This is on behalf of our tax collector. We have 6 resolutions. So what happened is she discovered a few oversights by her predecessor, which at the time was a temporary collector, during the 2020 prior year tax sale. So this is just some miscellaneous cleanup to issue tax sale certificates. And that will be on for action.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, number 3.
Item number 3, also on behalf of our tax collector, we are seeking approval to accommodate a resident on a very small balance. It's $5 and change. And this is also for action tonight, and so our collector could just resolve the issue as soon as possible.
Okay.
And item number 4 is just for discussion. We're seeking council's permission for a resolution to authorize our tax collector to cancel immaterial balances less than $10 without needing a resolution each time, and it's actually allowed under local fiscal affairs law. So that would prevent us from coming back, like for item number 3, for things like that every time it happens.
I'm okay with that. Is everyone okay with that? Do we have a lot that are under $10? You know, off the top of your head?
Usually it's done at the end of the year. It's
Okay.
just, it would allow sometimes if we
To
want
just
to
do
just.
it. Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you, that's all for finance.
Thanks, Carmine. Township Clerk?
Mayor and Council. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The first item is a little more than 50% of our liquor license renewals. It's 25 that you'll have later on in the meeting under action items. This is for the 2021-2022 renewal year, as their licenses expire on June 30th, 2021. And then we will have the balance of the renewals on the regular meeting on June 28th. So this is just for your consideration, and we're renewing half of the licenses tonight, 25 of them. The second item is a person-to-person transfer, Abuelo's Steakhouse. Mr. Abuelo has been running this steakhouse for over a year and has participated in our outdoor dining program last year and this year, and he's looking to transfer the liquor license to himself, which was previously run by Ms. Nidgrin from La Churcha Restaurant. And it's staying at the same location, 55 Bloomfield Avenue. In your packet, you have the background investigation by the police department, and everything is in order. So thank you to the police department for conducting the investigation and doing a thorough background check. That will be on for June 28th, the transfer.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments? All right. Sounds good. Township Council, number 1.
Mayor and Council, we have a vacancy on the Recycling Committee, and I'm recommending Brian Crawley to fill that vacancy.
Second, Councilwoman Cruz. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Liaison reports? Councilwoman Cruz?
Just a report from the Gardening Committee. So the garden members donate produce to Tony's Kitchen. This week, 31 pounds of produce were donated. The goal for the year is 1,000 pounds. Last year, we all reached the goal of 515 pounds. So we're excited to be able to support the community that way.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Anybody else? Councilwoman Mundell?
I just wanted to say thank you to the Beautification Committee, who did a really lovely job planting both outside the library and the Civic Center. If you drive by, the gardens are fully in bloom, and it looks really, really nice. And they also did a planting at the Triangle at the on Bloomfield Avenue and North 15th Street. So when you come into town up Bloomfield Avenue from Newark, there's like a really nice, welcoming, beautiful garden that greets you. So thank you to them. And finally, the library is fully open for browsing again, so please look at their website for details about their hours of availability. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Anybody else? Councilman Gamble?
Yes, I just wanted to remind residents that the Recreation Department is still taking spots for the summer camp. It's going to be in person, indoor, and outdoor. Spots are filling up quickly. And then also the summer sports clinics, those are almost full. And then there's additional summer classes. Some are available via Zoom. There's also art classes, a variety of types, sign making, art in the park. Friday Night Fun is going to be returning with some tie-dye kits that they'll be preparing. And then just wanted to let everyone know that the Recreation Department has planned a very full summer of fun. We had to make these plans prior to things getting better with the pandemic, so it'll actually be extending into the fall because we'll be doing the movie nights and drive-ins, as well as the summer car shows, and then the summer concert series that we normally do is shifting to the fall. So we'll have a fall concert series, and we'll be providing more information about that at a later date. Also happy to be bringing back the overnight family movie and camp out in September. And then last but not least, I know some people have been asking about 4th of July fireworks. As of right now, the plan is to do a fall concert finale with fireworks at Foley Field. So something to look forward to in the fall.
Okay. Councilwoman Cruz again?
Yes, hi everyone. I just want to remind everybody that this weekend we'll be doing the Township-wide Juneteenth celebration starting Friday at Bloomfield High School from 6 to 7:30 is a panel hosted by Board of Education and the Bloomfield Civil Rights Commission about the history of Juneteenth. Then on Saturday morning, there'll be a presentation of a proclamation at the steps of Bloomfield High School, where students will be reading poetry, and then we'll be doing a reenactment of the march from Montgomery to Selma. Sorry, Selma to Montgomery. I wrote it down too. The march from Selma to Montgomery, I apologize, and marching down to the Bloomfield College Quad, where Bloomfield College will host events, and then at 12 o'clock kicking off Freedom Day, which is a Juneteenth block party from Bloomfield Avenue to Lackawanna with performances, food vendors, goods vendors, just highlighting black businesses in Bloomfield and surrounding areas, and we're really happy about this event, and thank you every township department for your support in making this happen. I look forward to it, and the weather should be beautiful.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Before we go into closed, let's do these action items. Number 1, Councilwoman Mundell.
Mayor and Council, I have an ordinance to amend Chapter 494 Stormwater Control within the Township Code of the Township of Bloomfield. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilman Joanno. Is there any questions or comments from members of the council? Louise, please call the roll.
Councilwoman Mundell.
Yes.
Councilman Joanna.
Yes.
Councilwoman Cruz.
Yes.
Councilwoman Davis.
Yes.
Councilman Gamble.
Yes.
Councilman Rockwell.
Yes.
Mayor Denine.
Yes. Number 2.
We have a resolution, a renewal ABC license, liquor licenses for the year 2021, 2022. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilwoman Cruz. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 3.
Mayor and Council have a resolution authorizing tax collector to cancel small balance on 119 East Passaic Avenue. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilwoman Davis. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 4.
Mayor and Council, I have a resolution authorizing the issuance of duplicate tax sale certificate pursuant to NJSA 54:52.1. So moved.
Second?
Second, Councilman Gamble. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 5.
Mayor and Council, I have a resolution authorizing the tax collector to draft an affidavit to lien holder regarding a duplicate tax sale certificate. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilman Rockwell. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 6.
Mayor and Council, I have a resolution authorizing the tax collector to draft an affidavit to lien holders regarding a duplicate tax sale certificate. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilwoman Mundell. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 7.
Mayor and Council, I have a resolution authorizing the tax collector to draft an affidavit to lien holder regarding a duplicate tax sale certificate. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilman Joanno. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 8.
I have a resolution authorizing the tax collector to draft an affidavit to lien holder regarding a duplicate tax certificate. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilwoman Cruz. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 9.
Mayor and Council have a resolution authorizing the tax collector to draft an affidavit to lien holder regarding a duplicate tax sale certificate. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilwoman Davis. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 10.
Mayor and Council, I have a resolution, State of New Jersey, Department of Environmental Protection, Urban Parks Initiative. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilman Gamble. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 11.
Mayor and Council, I have a resolution authorizing application for State of New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection Green Acres Grant, Clark's Pond South and Vassar Field improvements. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilman Rockwell. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 12.
Mayor and Council, I have a resolution authorizing the 2021 award of a non-fair and open contract for public advocacy service with Mercury Public Affairs, LLC. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilwoman Cruz. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. And number 13.
Mayor and Council, I have the Township of Bloomfield approval bill list for June 14th, 2021. So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilman Joanno. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Can I get a motion to go into closed session?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.